So good evening, everyone. We are going to call this meeting to order. We do have quorum. There are quite a few members that are online joining us, even though the room is empty. All right, so we're gonna go.
Mark, can we still play the Superintendent?
Okay, all right. So number two, we're going to do the acknowledgement of traditional territory.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the lands, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
Thank you very much for that. So we're going to move to number 3, which is the approval of the agenda. Yeah. So for our members online, does anybody would like to move to receive the approval of the agenda? So that is Trustee Clark. And Anne, would you like to second that?
Yes, I'll do that.
Thank you very much. Great. And then number 4, declaration of conflict of interest. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? And I am seeing no hands raised. Okay, so we're good. And we're going to move on to number 5.1, the approval of the minutes, or sorry, number 5, approval of the minutes. The Special Education Advisory Committee meeting for February 27th, 2024. Okay. So Jennifer Knight, would you like to move for receipt or approval of the minutes?
Yep.
And Trustee Ray, would you like to? You're looking at it.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, unfortunately, I miss it, so.
Yes, no problem.
I've got my hand up.
Trustee Alves. Oh, Trustee Alves. Okay, so he will second that. Thank you very much, Trustee Alves. So we're moving along to number 6. So we have 6.1, delegation from Brianna Lava. Yeah, thank you. Regarding ADHD support and resources. Okay.
Thank you. I don't know if you can see the presentation, but I will start. You can see? Okay.
Sorry, before you start,
Yeah.
just to let you know, you have 10 minutes
Yes.
to present to us.
Yes.
Okay.
As I have mentioned, I've practiced this 12 minutes. It's very close. Thank you so much for having me here tonight to talk about something very important to a lot of our students. I want to say happy Neurodiversity Week, and I couldn't have timed this better to advocate for our children with ADHD. Again, when I did this presentation, I was well over 45 minutes. I have done my best to condense it. I'm at about 12 minutes, so please bear with me and thank you so much. Next slide, please. I just want to give you a little insight into how I got here. My name is Brianna Lava. I am a mother of 2 children who attend Peelschools, one in JK and one in grade 1. I'm currently in my 14th year as an educator for the board. and I've spent most of my time in special education. I've taught the enhanced learning class, I've taught the COM program, and I've done ISSP, which is in-school support. This amazing kid right here is my son, and he was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 4.5 years old. In advocating for him, despite my special education experience, despite him having an amazing teacher and administrator who support him wholeheartedly, the journey has been quite challenging. I have had many conversations with people at the board. I have written a letter to the board, and now I am here advocating for all children with ADHD. So I come to you tonight as a parent and an educator, doing what we do best, and that's advocating for our students. Next slide, please. The biggest challenges that families are experiencing in our education system with their children with ADHD is having the board recognize their child's disability as an exceptionality. And because of this, parents and caregivers are left in the dark to try to navigate what resources they can access for their children and how to access them. Another big challenge is that teachers and administrators aren't quite up to date in their knowledge of what we currently know about ADHD and how to support these students within the school. Next slide, please. So I'm going to present to you my call to action. There's 6 items on the list. I'm going to focus mostly on the first one, but I will touch on the other items. And I do want to state that what I'm proposing is already in place for a lot of the disabilities recognized as exceptionalities within the board. So number 1 is recognition. First and foremost, we need to recognize ADHD as an exceptionality. By recognizing ADHD as a standalone exceptionality, we would be affirming that these students are exceptional learners and ensuring that equitable access to resources and supports that they need to be successful. We talk a lot about affirming the identities of our students, and disability is absolutely a part of that work. This has been a goal for many advocates before me, and it's a fight we kind of keep on fighting. Acknowledging someone's disability as an exceptionality is a fundamental principle in promoting inclusion and equity. Next slide. So ADHD is recognized as a disability in our medical fields, in our Human Rights Code, our Disability Act, and by the Ministry of Education. On this slide, you can see that the Ontario Human Rights Commission points out that the ministry itself issued a memorandum to school boards dated December 19th, 2011, which states that the explicit inclusion of medical conditions in the categories of exceptionalities is not intended to exclude other medical conditions, specifically mentioning ADHD. So the language is very clear from the ministry that ADHD should be incorporated into that exceptionality category. Next slide, please. Here is the screenshot of our special education plan. You can see that there's a list of the exceptionalities and the service delivery model for each. What you will notice is that ADHD is absent from this list, and it is not mentioned once in the document at all. Next slide, please. I wanted to look at some of the disabilities that is mentioned in the PDSB special education plan. And as you can see from the slide, that the more commonly recognized exceptionalities represent a very small percentage of our overall student population in comparison to our ADHD. Next slide. The prevalence of ADHD is 7 to 9% of children in Canada. If we look at that as a proxy to the number of students we have at our board, that is anywhere between 7,000 to 13,000 students with ADHD. Next slide, please. Our current practices is that, again, the board does not designate ADHD as an exceptionality. However, when ADHD significantly impacts a child's ability to engage successfully in school, and identification may, and I've underlined that for a reason, occur under the learning disability exceptionality through an IPRC process. So let's think about that. We are requiring a child as young as 4 years old who has been given a diagnosis from a medical doctor or a psychologist to prove to the adults in the building that their disability significantly impacts their ability to engage successfully in school. Next slide, please. Let's take it a step further. Does this process apply to the other disabilities that are recognized? Furthermore, the language used that an identification may occur suggests that disability is subjective. And if that's the case, then who gets to decide? What are the metrics used to decide? It is imperative for the board to recognize ADHD as a standalone exceptionality because it is a standalone disability. Next slide, please. Number 2, equitable access to support. In past SEAC minutes, the December 12th SEAC meeting, it was reported for ongoing work to enhance equity of access, experiences, and outcomes for students with disabilities. And I could not agree more with this, especially when it comes to our students with ADHD. Creating and having an ADHD itinerant role, like we do for ASD and vision and hearing, and an established pathway of service would ensure that the school and the board takes responsibility in providing the necessary supports for students to ensure that all students with ADHD have equitable access to the supports that they need to be successful. Next slide, please. What does that look like? This is an example that the board already has in place. We have these in place with a lot of the disabilities that is recognized. So as you can see here from the graphic, the pathway is very clear. This is for the autism exceptionality. You have the assessment to an ISRC, which we now call an SRM, a student review meeting. It then goes to the IPRC where the student is identified as an exceptional learner. And then it goes to the support delivery model that that individual student would require to be successful. This is what we need for students with ADHD, a clear and explicit path to support. The other thing that I do want to highlight that an itinerant role provides is consultation to teachers and coordination of information between home, school, and community agencies. So that is ensuring that the teacher, whether they have knowledge about ADHD or the disability that they are supporting and advocating, that the teacher knows the up-to-date accommodations that can be made in the classroom, and that the communication is then transferred to the family and the caregiver so they are aware of the support and resources that their child needs to be successful in school. Next slide, please. Number 3, early intervention. As we all know, early intervention is so important when we talk about or when we support our most vulnerable students. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It means it can change over time. New neural pathways, strategies, tools can be taught to enhance their executive functioning skills and provide success for them in the classroom. Direct and explicit teaching of these executive functioning skills needs to be at the forefront of their education, their academic experience. Designating EAs to children, especially in the primary ages, where their executive function disorder, and more specifically, their emotional regulation, their impulsivity, and their self-regulation affects them in the classroom.
All right, I know you said you had 12 minutes prepared, so we're already at the 10-minute mark. I don't know if you can wrap it up in another minute.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, number 4, ADHD representative on SEAC. After listening to this year's SEAC meetings on live stream, I see firsthand how important the work is that you do here. And it is so important for bringing these issues to the forefront of our practices. And we do need a voice for children with ADHD. Next slide. Professional development. Professional learning and updated resources is so important when supporting our children with ADHD, as educators cannot support children that they do not understand. Even providing teachers a resource with observable behaviors and a corresponding accommodations that can be made is a huge step towards improving opportunities for success for students in the classroom. Most recently, an ADHD PD was offered for 50 educators. And although this is a great step forward, it's still such a small number when we consider the thousands of students impacted by the disorder. And finally, parents, I'm done right after this one, parent and family resources. We need to have up-to-date and informed resources for parents to access to enhance their understanding of ADHD in the class for their children at home and in school. Next slide, please. These are the 4 resources that are provided to parents, and I have to highlight in one that says help your child with ADHD succeed in schools, easy as 1, 2, 3. This second suggestion is to tell your child to stay focused and say no to distractions. This is their disability. This is their disorder. Advising someone with ADHD to just stay focused and say no to distractions is telling them to be less ADHD. It is not only discriminatory, it perpetuates our misconceptions that we fight every day. The next slide is my summary, which I won't go over because you have, and that is it. I want to thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. Like all of you in this room, I truly want to ensure that all children are seen, recognized, and provided the resources and supports they need to be successful at the Peel District School Board. I am hopeful that children with ADHD can be recognized and included in this endeavor. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that very in-depth, but it touched on quite a lot of information. Thank you for that delegation. However, today, this delegation we are going to receive today, and as a board or as a committee, we will take the opportunity to discuss, I guess, amongst ourselves, and then you will be receiving a response at the day. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you once again for that. And I would to proceed. So I would like to move for receipt of this delegation.
I was told that there were questions, but that's okay if that's changed. But I was told that I would receive questions. Yeah, if there aren't any, if there aren't any, then that's totally fine.
Jennifer, are you moving to receive or do you have a question?
I was moving to receive.
And trustee Clark is seconding. Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you, trustee Clark. All right, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. So now we're going to be moving on to number 7, which is reports from officials and staff. 7.1 is our superintendent Sakado's oral report.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Good evening, SEAC members, and thank you for your continued collaboration. I hope this message finds all of you well, especially those online tonight. I'm ready to provide an update on the current status of the progress of our ongoing projects, the VOC 1 review, elementary communications pilot, secondary communication shifts, and the jurisdictional review for supports for blind or visual students. As we continue to work diligently towards our objectives, it is essential to keep all SEAC partners informed and engaged with our process. The Vocational 1 review is progressing smoothly towards its timeline for completion in August. A committee has been established to guide the process with representation from special education, resource, curriculum departments, SEAC, and Vocational 1 schools. Terms of reference for the review have been established and preparation is underway for consultations with students currently enrolled in the program, their families and educators and other partners. This consultation process will inform the review on the efficacy of the existing program in preparing students for their desired post-secondary pathway and help guide recommendations for strengthening the program. This consultation, along with the wider data collection process through our support from the research department, is expected to be concluded in June to allow for data analysis, program development, and production of a final report for mid-August. A special education resource teacher has been hired to help plan for interim curricular supports and new programming for the Vocational 1 program. In the elementary communication class program, we have taken proactive steps to ensure effective communication and supports for families. We organized the family information sessions where questions could be asked in advance, leading to the creation of FAQs for schools and families. Communication classroom and resource teachers have been hired, and locations for communication clusters have been approved and shared. Updates to the admission and demission criteria have been made, and school teams with special educational resource teacher support are preparing for field office IPRCs with families being informed of placement decisions at that time. Following the IPRCs, transition planning meetings will be held to facilitate smooth transitions. During the pilot next year, we will be collecting data to evaluate the growth areas. As well, collaboration with SEAC kids will be ongoing to support with data collection and ensure program fidelity and improved instruction and reading. In alignment with the Right to Read report, beginning the 2024-2025 school year, the grade 9 regional communication program will provide direct reading instruction in the learning strategies class in the first semester of learning skills called Reading and Writing class semester 2. We'll be using a reading intervention program called Literal Change that is based on the Orton-Gillingham structured literacy approach and benefits learners with diverse learning portraits. Up to 3 teachers per regional communication school will participate in training for the Literal Change program. The training involves a 35-hour asynchronous e-learning course, and teachers will be provided release time on March 27th to begin the training. In June, all teachers of the grade 9 secondary regional communication program will engage in professional learning and will be provided an overview of the Literal Change program and learn how they can support reading and written expression in all of their content areas. Student portraits and identity reviews have begun, and IPRCs for the secondary regional communication programs are scheduled in April. The jurisdictional scan for support for blind, low vision students includes gathering information to determine itinerant service eligibility and levels of service offered by boards in Southern Ontario. Currently, we have updated information from 6 local boards, as well as from W. Ross McDonald, the provincial demonstration school. We are still waiting to hear from 3 other boards, and we have additional information from 2 other provinces on their service eligibility requirements. We are examining what criteria is used, for example, acuities, field loss, CVI, what reports need to be shared, orientation and mobility service models and providers, and types of itinerant service provided. For example, direct, indirect, monitor, and consultation. This information will help us review our criteria and processes and identify any areas for improvement. We will have a report back to SEAC by May 2024. If you recall from my October report, we have worked in partnership with the Transition Advisory Committee and the Dufferin-Peel Catholic School Board to offer the Central Resource Fair. It is an in-person event that gives the community the opportunity to learn about supports and services available after high school for students with developmental or intellectual disabilities. This event features exhibitors from service providers like community programs, government supports, recreational opportunities, and employment supports. The first event took place in November in a Dufferin-Peel school and in the north and was a huge success. Many families attended. We are repeating this opportunity for families in the south on Tuesday, April 24th from 6:30 to 8:30 at Applewood Acres Secondary School. All SEAC members are invited and encouraged to share this widely with their community, and my administrative assistant Pamela will be sending out the flyer to all SEAC members tomorrow. Finally, I'm more than pleased to share with you that at the last board meeting, our amazing trustees voted unanimously in support of advocacy to the ministry to increase the amount of special education funding we receive in this Peelschools school board. As we do in Cecil and across the board, the trustees are deeply committed to serving students with disabilities and ensuring that as a board, we have the necessary funding to support students to ensure they have the equity of access, experience, and outcome. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to our continued partnership.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Sakado, for that report. Do I see any questions comments? Okay. I don't see any hands raised, so I would like to actually ask a question. Did I hear that you said we have a transition facilitator? Oh, yeah.
No, we have not yet hired a transition facilitator. The one is on maternity leave still. There's a transition program we're working on for into the communication class.
Okay. Okay, so if I see no further questions, can I ask for receipt of Superintendent Sakato's oral report?
Sorry to interrupt. I think Wes has his hand
Oh.
up. I apologize. I think Wes had his hand up.
Oh, okay, all right, sorry, Wes? You go ahead. Sorry, I think your mic is off, we can't hear you. No, sorry, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Wes, if you could type it out in the chat, I'll read it. He's asking, would it be possible to get a copy of Ms. Lava's presentation? Did you hear that?
Yes, we
Yes,
did, just a moment.
For you, Chair, Council Lockyer, do we share copies of delegation presentations?
It already was, so we can share it again.
The slide.
No, we
So
had
sorry to
only
interrupt
the
it.
attachments, not the slides itself. She didn't want the slides to be shared before the meeting, but we can definitely share.
Oh, through you, Chair, yes, we have just heard from Council Lockyer that we can share the slides. The delegate had asked that we not share them prior to the meeting. But we'll just confirm that she's comfortable sharing post-meeting and send those out.
They're public now.
Oh, they're public, so yes, we can share them.
All right, does that answer your question, Wes? Still talking.
Okay, it looks like he has another one. He said, thanks. Do we have outdated info from the other boards with respect to the blind and low vision? Or is this the first time this has been gathered, this info has been gathered?
Through you, Chair, this is the first time we've done this comprehensive of a jurisdictional review. So as I'm new to the role, I'm not sure if previous superintendents had done that. But we did not have that collated through our coordinating principal, Jeff Bertrand, nor through the itinerant. So we have been collecting up-to-date data in response to requests from the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Ellis, do you have a question? I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you, Superintendent Sakato, just wanted to ask if you might be able to forward me a copy of the oral presentation. I'm wondering if maybe you have something you could share with us. There was kind of a lot to break down there, and I think I might have a few questions for email.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I do not share copies of my oral report generally, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you if you'd like to at any time to clarify any questions.
Thank you.
So seeing no further questions, Wes, did you have another question? Your hand is still up. Oh, okay. Dorothy, would you like to receive Superintendent Sakato's report?
Yeah. Yes, I will.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. And can we have someone else? I know Trustee Clark, you've been a few times. All right, well, I see no one else, so Trustee Clark, we will second that. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to move on to 7.2, which is response to SEAC motion SE 21, pathway outcomes for students with special needs. And that will be presented by Superintendent Smith.
Thank you so much, and through you, Chair. Good evening. The presentation is provided in response to the SEAC motion SE 21 that requests a report on pathway outcomes of special education students, specifically students with intellectual disabilities. This question is difficult to answer due to the lack of an effective tracking system once the student is no longer enrolled at the Peel District School Board. Privacy, diverse pathway options, students moving, and adequate resources are just some of the barriers that contribute to having limited information. This report provides the data we do have available. Next slide, please. Graduation is determined by tracking the outcomes of students who attended a PDSB school in their grade 9 year. For the students who entered grade 9 in 2018-19 and worked towards an Ontario secondary school certificate, 82% completed the certificate in 4 years and 89% in 5 years. 5% of this group left school without graduating. For students working towards a certificate of accomplishment, 15% achieved the certificate in 4 years and 20% in 5 years. The remaining students continued in their education program for a 6th year within the Peel District School Board. Next slide, please. Another source of information available is the exit information that students and families may provide when the student leaves the Peel District School Board. In this graph, you can see the light green bars represent students working towards an Ontario Secondary School Certificate, or OSSC. As mentioned earlier, you see the 5% of students who left without completing. Of the students who did complete the OSSC, 7% returned to PDSB, 10% went on for further education. So for example, a secondary school in another district, training out of the province, or told us that they were going to college. 7% indicated they were going to work, and 72% of the students and families did not provide any information. Next slide, please. As page 3 of the report suggests, there is insufficient information about post-secondary pathways for students. It's impossible to correlate outcomes to the programs provided by the Peel District School Board. Furthermore, this is currently not a ministry mandate or process. And similarly, all other boards do not collect post-secondary pathways data. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps for us knowing this, as part of the Vocational 1 review, we will continue to work with community partners to develop programming that includes enhancing skill development and functional academics to better prepare students for post-secondary pathways and the workplace. And we also will continue to advocate to the Ministry of Education and other ministries, including Economic Development, Job Create and Trade, to build better post-secondary pathways for students with an OSSC and COA. That's the end of my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that report. Do I see any questions online? Oh, all right, so Trustee Clark, see your hand up.
Yes. Are we asking, in regards to the 72% who didn't supply any additional information, are we asking them, and how are we asking them? I mean, I understand through your presentation that no other board does, tracks outcomes in that way. So just what are we doing in order to gather that information?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. So once our students leave our district, we no longer have any jurisdiction over them. They are now, having left the board, they are no longer students of the district, so we cannot access information from them. We only access data from our students while they are, in fact, registered students in the Peel District School Board. So we don't have mechanisms to access any additional data once they leave the district. And that is consistent with all other districts in the province through the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, if I could have a follow-up, then how do we get the data from the other students who go on to post-secondary education to find out what their outcomes are?
Thank you for the question and through you, Chair. So the information that we have would be from when they are leaving our district. So we would collect information at the point of exit. And then following that, we do not have any additional information. And that is something that we do not have from the ministry either for any district in terms of students who leave after they graduate.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question? Okay. So Dorothy, I see your hand is up.
I'd like to piggyback on Councillor Clark's statement in that why don't we simply do an exit interview so you have that data?
So that is how we do, sorry, thank you for the question and through you, Chair. That is how we receive any information about anyone who is graduating. So students might be asked through their teachers or guidance counselors and as well through any other form of data gathering that we may be employing as a district. But beyond there, we do not gather any data.
Okay, again, I understand what you're saying, but in the same way you can gather that data from individuals moving on to post-secondary. I don't know, or can you explain to me what barriers are in place, why you can't gather that the same information from the students prior to leaving school or from their families?
So the information that I've shared in this presentation is through that data gathering process. And we may not necessarily get full input from the types of surveys and questions that we are asking. And we do rely on our staff to gather that information. And certainly moving forward, we are considering all of the mechanisms that we are using internally in order to gather that information. And that can be moving forward through our guidance counselors and other exit interviews. So that is something that we are considering as a research department more in-depthly moving forward. Currently, this is the information that we have. I hope that answers your question.
So to ensure that I've gotten the information correct from you, moving forward, this is something you're going to implement because you recognize that it's a mechanism in which to capture the data that we don't have. Because when individuals with exceptionalities are moving to or transitioning to the next stage outside of the Peel District School Board, there's always some, or should be anyway, some programming in place, some, what's the word I'm looking for? Planning in place for next steps. I think that would be the position of the transition coordinator. So once those steps are taken, especially in light of the fact that those individuals get to stay in school longer, I would think that you can gather that information from the planning process for the next steps for those students. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. I do hear your question and understand your reasoning. However, at the same time, we collect information to the extent that we can. And as I mentioned in slide 1, privacy, diverse pathway options, students moving, and adequate resources are just some of the barriers that we encounter in collecting data. And once students leave the Peel District School Board, we no longer have access to them in order to collect that data.
Okay, my apologies. I don't want to belabor this. However, I am challenged in understanding how it is that you would not be able to capture that data because planning is in place for the students that are leaving the Peel District School Board. We simply don't shove them out the door and say, God bless you, go with God. We have planning in place. And because you have planning in place, that information is accessible prior to them leaving school.
Thank you again for your comment, and the information that we do have from the processes that we do have internally are those that are presented in this presentation. That is the data that we have currently.
All right, Dorothy, does that satisfy your question to a point?
No.
Well, I guess, Associate Director De Silva is coming to the mic.
Thank you, Chair, and certainly appreciate the question, Dorothy, and I think I understand what both of you are trying to convey here this evening. And I think the challenge is, and I do agree, I think we do require some information around the potential of where students are going. And I think the accuracy of the data, I think, is always in question from a research department. When they want to share the data, they want to make sure that the accuracy of the data is sufficient so that we can take that data and work with it. So we'll do our best, and we'll take that back for consideration for sure around some type of exit interview, whether you call it an interview, a survey, conversation, those types of things, and we'll determine what we can do to capture that information moving forward. But knowing that I understand some of the complexities around, the responses may not ultimately give us the most accurate data. For example, students often will say, whether we do take a survey or not, whether they actually do what they say they're doing on the surveys also comes in question. Do they end up, sometimes students in grade 12 will say, I'm off to U of T. There's a percentage of those students that don't actually make it to U of T. So that data becomes tainted because the accuracy is somewhat incorrect. Some will say I'm going off to employment, but in fact, they don't. They actually come back for another year. So the survey data is going to come into question for sure. However, it does give us kind of a global perspective of the potential of where those pathways may reside.
Thank you for that. I guess I'm looking at it, and again, respectfully, I understand what you said, but I'm looking at it through different lenses. So for the parents that I have assisted in the past, and I myself have gone through this process, can say that individuals with exceptionalities that's leaving school, there's always planning in place for them. And yes, I understand that there might be some variables, but more times than not, if someone is going to a day program, parents have those structures, those processes in place because there's a wait for day programs. So again, I'm looking at it through those lenses where you have a clear understanding as to what next steps are for individuals, some individuals with exceptionalities leaving the Peel District School Board. So those types of variables very seldom change, and you would have programs, processes in place. You have a transitional facilitator that is there to assist to have those things in place. So the student simply does not leave school and the parents don't have what next steps could possibly look like for their child or for their loved one. So that's what I'm saying. Through those lenses, there's a clear understanding as to what next steps look like, and it's executable because for some of those students, that is their only option. Right? We're not talking about individuals with exceptionalities going on to post-secondary school. That you would also be able to, that you'd have the data on as well. And yes, there are times in which those individuals may not go straight into a job for whatever the reason. But I would think that that's a small percentage versus the majority of students leaving school who is going to a day program, who is going to a job sharing program, who is going to BCCL or Carrie's Place for Autism Services. I think it, and this is just through the lens for which I have journeyed, you have those datas, you have that data available.
So through you, Chair, sorry. So through you, Chair, I wouldn't disagree one iota to what you're sharing, just with respect to the resources and the transition piece for those students. I think I don't think we're disagreeing with that. I think it's just the data collection piece and the sharing of that information that becomes a challenge, as it has to be developed and processed with rigor, academic rigor, and through the research department. And then we have, in addition to that, sharing of the information, because potentially, as you just described, we may have less than 5 students who access some of those resources that you just shared, and we wouldn't necessarily be able to share that information because, again, it's a number less than 10, and it then broaches the level of privacy, because essentially people could triangulate that data and determine who that particular student is. So I'm not saying that the resources and the potential transition facilitator and all of that work cannot be done. I would agree 1,000% that is what we need to be doing to ensure resources are accessed for students who are potentially leaving or thinking of leaving or moving on to a multitude of pathways. I'm just cautioning just around the level of information that potentially could be shared from the perspective of the board and numbers and so on. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so our next question is going to be from Topaz Hines. If you can go ahead with your question.
Hi there, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I just wanted to, going back to the report, the results, I just wanted to reconfirm, when was that data collected? Based on what year? Was it prior to the pandemic?
Thanks for the question. This data that is on slide 3 is from 2018-19 grade 9 cohort.
Oh, grade 9. Oh, okay, I understood. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify to have a better understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is Trustee Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Not so much a question as a comment. Just wanted to thank staff for the report. I thought it was great. I really appreciated the data they provided. And I just wanted to add that I completely understand the difficulty when it comes to data capture and, whether it's an exit interview or a survey, even speaking from personal experience, where I thought I was going to be and where I ended up were, quite different. And I think that's the case for a lot of students, not even considering students that might have a gap in their educational career or employment after post-secondary, or, just coming out of high school. So I can completely understand how difficult it can be to get accurate data and just the cost that it would go into trying to sort through all of it and keep up with it. So just thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just want to clarify if I understood the discussion correctly and your comments to that you have data at the exit and when the students are still within the district, which is what you presented, or what you do not have, at least the one that you can attest to accuracy and integrity of the data, is what happens is say +1, +2, +3, +4 years, and you do not want to bring that without having sufficient rigor around the data and then make it part of the official documents and stuff. Is that correct? I think it's not clear that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Jennifer Knight, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So I find it very concerning that we do not have any idea what are happening to 72% of our most vulnerable students. This is something we're supposed to be working on and improving. So I think we really need to mine that data, and it makes me sad that at this level we don't even understand what 72% of those students are doing after high school. That to me is very concerning. And I think not only the data, but that makes me wonder, like, do they not know what they're doing? Are they just getting thrown out there? Without having data to support that we're sending them anywhere productive or good for them, I would suggest we can't say we are. So what are we going to do, like really do, not just think about how are we going to ensure that we understand where these students are going and that they are getting the education they need to do what they need to do.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. This is very important information, as you have indicated. And as I look at the graph again on slide 3, and we indicate that 72% of students, we do not know how it is that they continued into whatever programs after they graduate from the Peel District School Board. We are taking this away, and as Associate De Silva has said, Associate Director De Silva has indicated, we are going to be looking to see if there are any ways that we could access any of this information ourselves through our internal processes. Currently, unfortunately, we do not have the means. And again, with regards to privacy, nor the ability to share any information because of the smaller numbers of students with regards to needs and what it is that they continue to do after they graduate. And so we are taking this away. And also note that the education system here, kindergarten to grade 12, is under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Education. Colleges and universities are under another ministry. And so again, I think that it is important that we think about how are we working with our partners in college and university in terms of the kind of programs that are offered for our students and what kind of monitoring processes are available through them. And that is the kind of advocacy that we will continue to take as we meet with Ministry of Education colleagues in order to see what kind of processes we can put in place to support your requests here.
Can I follow up with that?
Certainly.
So I just wondering sort of what does the time frame for this? And even if we can't share individual data, I don't think we need to worry about that yet. I think we need to understand, like I'd like to hear from the board that we know that, you know, 75% of our students are going on to good things or something. Like what you presented here is disturbing to me, that no one can say, you know, things are good. You know, they're not, obviously, we all know that. But forget the details about how we can share it and that kind of thing. What's the plan? What's the timeline for it? To know that we're sending our students out somewhere.
Thank you again for your comments, and through you, Chair. To reiterate again, we do not have the means by which we can collect that data, and neither does any district in all of the province. And so this is something that we do not have a policy or a process for from the Ministry of Education. This is certainly a very important piece, as we do agree with you in terms of what you are raising, and we'll continue to advocate to see how we can access this information so that we have more information to share at especially these kinds of sessions. With regards to timelines, it would be at the end of the year when we do conduct exit surveys. And so we'll be reviewing our processes with our transition staff as well in terms of the kind of supports that we're providing for our students, more specifically those with special needs, in order to see how it is that they are selecting and moving forward from Peel District School Boards once they do graduate. So that is the timeline for us in terms of reviewing processes internally and of course advocating to the ministry.
Okay, great. So I understand there will be a survey in place at the end of this year for all students, and we'll have the results of that in the fall. Is that safe to say?
Actually, that's not what I said. However, we will be reviewing our processes to see how we could access that information. And currently we are accessing information similar to what we've shared here. And so we'll be reviewing our processes. And once we do review, then an exit survey would be something that we can put together and implement, yes, at the end of the year. But at this time, I can't make that commitment for this year, considering the timelines.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, for that. Before I go to Dorothy, I do have a few questions of my own. So I find it kind of curious, once again, the motion that was presented specifically spoke to students with intellectual disabilities. And when I originally presented the motion, it was rewritten and it eliminated students with intellectual disabilities. This presentation that we received today says nothing about students with intellectual disabilities. Very curious as to why that is. One of the issues that I have with, I know we're getting kind of caught up on where students go after the board, after they leave the board. The real issue is the pathway. So every student in the Peel District School Board, I do believe, is supposed to be following my blueprint. Is that correct? Correct. So that is whether they're in the mainstream or if they're going working towards a COA, Ontario's like a certificate or whatever, they all should have filled in my blueprint. Is that not correct?
That's available to them. Yes.
Sorry, that caught me off. What does that mean?
My blueprint is a resource that's available to all students, yes.
But do all students not have to fill that out? Like, do the teachers not go through that with all students?
Through you, Chair, if I may, I'm not sure about all students and all programs accessing it. That's something I can ask and clearly bring back to you. I can ask some of our students in congregating programs if that's something that they're using right now. I'm not aware. I'll have to bring that back to you.
So why would these students, okay, that's fine. Okay, I will respect that. Because if that, we track our typically developing students with the My Blueprint. So we don't actually follow them out the door to ask them where they're going, but using My Blueprint, it charts their pathway. And if they want to go to university, then they know, okay, if I want to end up here, these are the steps that I have to go through. Our students with intellectual disabilities, which is what I specifically spoke to with my motion. Yes, I don't mind the other information for all students, but I specifically asked for students with intellectual disabilities. That was what I was hoping that I would get some sort of a response regarding. The lack of that information, I'm assuming that those students are not important enough for us to have any information on. No, I'm very, very serious. We have a lot of students, I represent students with Down syndrome, and the fact that these students go through the board, go through this educational process, have no pathway or no charted pathway. We have no curriculum for these students. And then when they're on their way out the door, guidance counselors are asking them about college and what, I mean, if you don't prepare them for college, how in the world are they going to access college? Many of our students are sitting at home, just so you know that. After getting up every morning and coming to school, they're sitting at home, right? I have a lot of families that I support, and the question as of June last year was, where's your kid going? What are you doing? Nobody knew what their children were doing. And this is something that, from my understanding, the Peel District School Board, when you're in the Vol 1 program, there's supposed to be some sort of an end game, right?
May I through your turn and answer that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, and we have gone through, as you know, and you're on the committee, so thankful for that. A really kind of tremendous look and interrogation of the Vocational 1 program. In fact, we had a meeting today that discussed exactly what you're talking about, looking at skill trajectory through the courses that they have. What are the required requisite skills in each of the courses that they have over 7 years, because that's the longest students would be with us, and working through years of building skills and development. So if we can share more details now through coordinating principal Jeff Bertrand, or you can know that this is the pathway that we're taking, because we agree with you that we need to have a more comprehensive skill development through curriculum, not only in isolation. So we're looking at requisite skills that would be required along with requisite learning to have academic rigor in combination. and not in isolation. We will certainly too also try to put in courses around general learning, getting ready for the workplace. Coordinating Principal Bertrand has all the codes. I just know what the courses are, but we are looking at adding those to the Vocational One roster as required courses. So we make sure that we're giving exactly what you're talking about, interview skills, workplace readiness, those types of things as being required in the program. So that's all part of the program review that we're doing right now, and that we'll share with you updates at the next committee meeting.
So that sounds like life skills, and you did say academics
skills, yes,
as well.
Yes,
just the life skills.
No, integrated into course material. So it's going to be in combination, not in isolation.
Okay, so basically what you're saying at this point is you're not aware of students in those programs doing the My Group blueprint.
I will ask that question.
Okay, and then sorry, Superintendent Smith. Yes. Okay. Could you clarify who the transition staff is? Because I know we don't have the facilitator. When you say transition staff, who exactly are we talking about? Because before we had the transition facilitator, which he was phenomenal, we already had, I guess, whoever the staff was that wasn't really doing a very good job while we had the facilitator. So if you could clarify as to
Through you, Chair, I can take that question. So as you know, we have not yet replaced, and we are restructuring and sharing some of that restructuring later during the motion action log. But we do have increased communication through guidance counselors who are all transition supports for all students at all levels, including in our VOC1 programs and any other congregated programming. So we do have transition staff that work only on transitions throughout that in all schools. And then we also have plans for next year to, again, have that support in place centrally through the CESO department.
So at the moment, we don't necessarily have anyone specific to special education.
Not specifically, no, but we do have teams that go in and help through the guidance counselors with programming pathways.
Okay, so in response to, I will say, the motion that I put forward, I'm totally not satisfied with the response. But I guess if we don't know where our students are going, we don't know where our students are going. And that's very unfortunate. Like Jennifer said, like 70% of these students, no one knows where they are. And I feel that if the motion didn't rattle a few cages, nobody would care where they went. But I am hoping through this this process that we will do a better job serving those students with intellectual disabilities and others to have an actual productive future. Yeah, I won't take up too much more time. Dorothy Petty, you have your hand up.
Hi, it's clear that we're passionate about this conversation. Superintendent, you've identified steps that you have currently in place in terms of building the skills to create successes for students leaving. So you're working from a trajectory of this is where you'd like your loved one to land. Let's work backwards, build the skill set so that when they're leaving school, they have those skill sets in place. So it sounds to me like you have an idea as to the information it is that we're seeking, right? And again, not in all cases will the individual land where the trajectory that the person will land there. However, it sounds as if you have the mechanism in which to gather the information. Now I get it. You're speaking about privacy and things of that nature. Respectfully, you're gathering the information from typically developing students. So it's concerning that this is going to be a roadblock specific to individuals with disabilities versus non-individuals or individuals with non-disabilities. It seems it's coming across a little bit skewed to me that how you can gather information from one subgroup and not from the other. And again, we've been asking this for quite some time in different ways, but we're asking this to extract this information, right? Where are our children going after school? And do we have the mechanisms in place, the processes in place to ensure their successes throughout the school tenure and into the next phase of life? And if these processes are not in place, then how do we go about policing or addressing what the discrepancies are? We've been going around and around in circles for quite some time. And Jennifer, Mary, myself, other individuals on the team have been saying the same thing for years. So now we're talking about the end game and where are they landing, and we still have no information. We're talking about how they move or transition through the school system and, you know, the variables of them not having the correct structure, the support in place, and how we go about, you know, trimming the fat and rejiggling this and rejiggling that just to ensure the structure, the foundation is in place for these students. We've been at it for quite some time. And we're now looking at the end game, and the end game looks bleak as well. So I'm a little bit frustrated and taken aback that we still have no more information, the information that we need, the information that parents need. You can't give us that.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Oh, sorry.
The struggle is real, and we're feeling the heat. As parents, as advocates, we're feeling the heat, and I'm a little bit miffed.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I do want to make it clear that we have a deep commitment to student success and well-being, especially sitting here to talk about our students with intellectual disabilities. We do have a commitment to that, which is why we are taking the time to really revamp and reconsider programming, skill development, like you said, Dorothy, working backwards to design to make sure we understand the outcome and how do we do that in tangible incremental steps throughout their time in VOC 1 programming or any other programming. We've interrogated many programs since we've arrived here and have a commitment to that. So I want to make it abundantly clear, we have a commitment to improve pathways for students with intellectual disabilities, and I want to make that clear. As for the data collection, I think that both the Associate Director De Silva and Superintendent Smith have shared some of the kind of shortfalls in our ability to collect reliable data. I think we've shared that. I understand and hear and acknowledge your frustration, and we can have a discussion after about what we can do to remedy that frustration. So I do want to acknowledge that. I also wanted to share that we will answer the questions that have not been answered as we move forward.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Superintendent Sakado. Ann Smith, I see your hand up. You have a question? Ann, are you there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, I'm sorry. I think this is something that we really need to discuss at this VOC 1 subcommittee. It's really very important as to what happens later. And, you know, it also brings back to me the importance of the transition facilitator. I think to eliminate that position is not a good idea. In fact, we need more than one transition facilitator. So I think that's something that also should come to this VOC 1 committee. And I think, Mary, you're on the committee, and so am I. And is Dorothy? I'm not sure about Dorothy. But it's really, really important what happens to these students after they leave school. And I have some personal experience on that. I think I've been fairly fortunate with my son, who has has been employed since he left school, but not full-time. But he's also got quite involved in volunteer commitments, and that's a good thing to pursue as well.
Thank you very much, Anne, for your comments. I see no more hands. So I'm going to ask, Anne, would you like to move for receipt of this?
So yes, I will do that.
And do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
All right, Dorothy, thank you very much. And I am sure going forward, we'll have much discussion. But I know it takes up quite a bit of time at the meeting when we get into that, but I think we're gonna have to have an opportunity to sit down and discuss this further. Thank you very much. We're gonna move on to number 8, communications for action or receipt. So we have none. Number 9, chair's request for written questions from committee members. Yeah, so Chair Foster did not share any, and I did not receive anything on number 9. So we're going to move on to number 10. Reports from representatives on councils and associations. Okay, so I see 2 hands. Ann Smith, is your hand up from your previous question, or did you have something to add?
Sorry, no, I should have taken it down. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so Wes McDonald, I see your hand.
Okay, go ahead, Wes. I'll read it out. Okay, just give him a sec while he types the question and I'll read it out for him.
So is that a new question that's going to be coming at number 11 from Wes?
I don't know. Okay, here we go. Jassy had a number of questions forwarded to the board on OPVIC. Don't know about that.
Yes, through you, Chair. I did not realize that was for SEAC. We were collating responses to those to share back with Jazzy individually. I did not realize that she wanted them to come to SEAC. So we are currently working on those questions.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So I see no more hands. Okay. So we're going to move on. So that takes care of number 11 as well. Have any other questions from committee members? No hands. Jennifer Knight.
Yeah, sorry, I did submit a question as well to you. I know you did respond, but I think it's important that it's recorded for SEAC. I don't know if you agree with that, Claudine.
Yes, please ask it now, Jennifer. Thank you.
Sure. So I sent an email earlier, I guess before the week before the March break, regarding some incidents that are happening in the school board. I'm just going to read it because that's probably easier. So on Friday, I became aware of an issue at a school where 4 contained classrooms were shut down due to staffing shortages. Parents were called to come and pick up their children moments after sending them to school on buses. I spoke with Pamela on Friday, and she had indicated that it's basically a decision of the superintendent of the family of schools. And unfortunately, it's happening due to lack of staffing, and there's nothing else that really can be done at this point. On further discussion with parents and other Peel schools, it's been made clear that this is not an isolated issue, that staffing issues are causing many hardships for our most vulnerable students. Students are not being toileted or coming home wet. Classes are being combined. Students are not being treated with dignity, and their basic personal needs are not being met. We are not even discussing the educational aspect of their day. Some parents are finding that they need to stay close to the school throughout the day to be available to toilet their children or to perform other personal care needs. I believe the board can do better and must do better to meet these students' needs and carry out their legal obligations to these students. Please provide a report of the number of special needs classes that have been temporarily closed over the past year due to staffing issues and other challenges. I'd also like to know how many mainstream students are being sent home due to lack of staffing for a whole day. I understand that they're too affected, but it appears that students with needs are more severely affected by these issues. In some cases, parents have been told that teachers for special education classes are being dispersed to mainstream classes due to lack of resources. I understand that within the board, there's been much discussion and troubleshooting around these issues. I'd like to understand whether the board has identified some of the root causes of these issues and what's being done to mitigate the issues. For years, we've been hearing that EA and more recently teacher absenteeism is a huge challenge, but we're yet to hear the results of any work to determine the root cause and reduce the problem. I'm hoping that there's work behind the scenes that's happening that you can share with us that shows you have a plan to get out of this. Parents of these students would like to understand the following: the number of special education classes being closed and students sent home, number of mainstream students as well, the procedures and policies that are around closing classrooms due to lack of resources, special education versus mainstream, if different, procedures for communicating with parents on lack of resources that cause changes to student care, classroom combinations, changes in staff personnel or ratios, and closing of classrooms. Results of the root cause analysis of EA and teacher absenteeism and staff shortages, and corrective actions underway to address absenteeism and short staff shortages. So yeah, our parents, are frustrated, and some of them are choosing between getting food on the table and having to have their children have an appropriate place to be during the day. So we really need to do something. It's something we've been talking about for a long time. We know there's a problem. So I just want to understand if we know what the problem is and what we're doing to fix it. Thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. And I appreciate, Jennifer, you sending that in writing, because we are looking at a more comprehensive response. We have been made aware of some situations where programs are closed down, and it is, as shared, the decision of both the school principal and school superintendent. But in discussions since your email, Jennifer, with Human Resources and with the Director's Office, we are very committed to creating a procedure that would help really ensure that we're keeping classes open unless ultimately necessary. There are many times that classes are canceled for mainstream students because of lack of coverage, but it doesn't have the same level of impact as you shared as it does for students with special education needs. So that is noted and understood. But we also have students with special education needs that have specific and complex needs that can only be served through an educational assistant. That could be things like toileting, G-tube feeding, lifting and changing. Some of the really kind of refined levels of expertise of our amazing EAs and the board cannot be done by anybody else but those who have been trained. But Jennifer, you've asked a lot of questions, and I can come back with a more comprehensive approach, but I do want you to know and be assured that it is something that the Human Resources Department is looking at very seriously. We have incentive programs to attract more EAs, supply EAs to work on a daily basis and pick up absences. We are tracking absentee rates of staff and having conversations to try to understand that data, but I can bring a more fulsome answer back to your question after, and I'm just going to ask Associate Director Paul De Silva to share. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I think, thank you, Claudine, for offering your services as usual all the time. But I think that level of response may require the Director of Human Resources to potentially come here to share what some of those questions that were asked from Jennifer, so that she's able to respond to ongoing work that's not only going on, but also proactively what sorts of measures that they have in place, and potentially can maybe speak to the potential root causes that I think is beyond your purview and mine. So I think that might be something we can address with requesting their presence at an upcoming meeting.
Thank you for that, Associate Director De Silva. Does that clarify your question or answer your question, Jennifer?
Yeah, that's great. I look forward to hearing what you can bring forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. See no more hands. I do have a question, Associate Director De Silva. A few meetings ago, I did ask the question, look, Superintendent Sagado mentioned that the trustees voted to, I guess, increase the
Advocacy.
special education funding, was it? You said?
Sorry, the advocacy to the Ministry of Education for additional special education funding. So it's advocacy to the ministry.
Okay, all right. So it reminded me of a question that I did ask you a few meetings ago. I asked you, do unidentified students generate the same amount of funding as identified students? You did not have a response from me at the time.
I did put it on the motion action log, so I can answer it now and we will skip that one over.
Okay.
So I did reach out to the ministry to ask. So the Ministry of Ontario provides district school boards with special education grant funding as a part of the Grants for Student Need. The SEAC supports students with special education needs. It's the additional or incremental costs of the programs and services that they may require. But specifically regarding IPRCs and funding, that SEG funding is not directly tied to IPRCs. So if students have multiple exceptionalities, it does not increase the level of funding. In other words, having more or less students go through the IPRC process will not generate more or less funding for school boards, since conducting an IPRC does not generate that funding. So they're saying that it doesn't matter if students have multiple exceptionalities or only one. And a formal IPRC, the grant is given for the special education grant funding as a part of the grants for student needs. So there's no additional funding for students who are formally IPRC, but they do get additional funding through the SEG, if that makes sense. So there's special education grant funding for students who on that ONSIS reporting, the ministry reporting, when we say they are special education students, there's additional funding given to those students based on their special education needs.
Okay.
As a part of the grant for the GSN, the grant for student needs, which is the overall funding per pupil allocation. So students with special education needs do get generated additional allocation, but it doesn't matter if they're IPRC or not. They still get it based on what the supports that are in through ONSIS reporting. So the answer is yes, they get additional funds, but they don't have to be formally identified as exceptional.
Okay.
That's what I shared.
Thank you very much for that. All right.
Sorry, just so through you, Chair, as well, just but the SIP funding needs to be generated through the schools in order for that to take place.
Yes,
correct?
for the ONSIS report. Yeah.
So it just doesn't happen. And I think part of the question through you, Chair, was not having non-identified IEPs, does that support the generation of funds? And the answer would be no.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Jennifer, did you have another question, or is your hand just still up?
Sorry, I forgot to unraise it.
Okay, no problem. Just want to make sure. All right, all right, I see Dorothy, your hand is up now. Question?
Okay, so to clarify, so I understand, students who are identified with an IPRC, they get funding, or as long as they have a need, because we have a great deal of kids who don't go through the IPRC process. So
Correct.
Is it anyone? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. So if they have a need, as demonstrated through the SIF process, which is reporting that schools do to say the level of service that students are getting,
right,
that generates funds, but it doesn't increase. We don't increase the amount of funding we get if we formally go through an IPRC.
Okay.
So it's a needs-based funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And seeing no further hands, we will move on to number 12, committee member motions for consideration. No motions, okay. Number 13, notices of motions and petitions, and we have none. And we're gonna move to number 14, which is action motion log, so 14.1.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. We've been trying to do a more diligent job at documenting all of the questions that we receive and making sure we have a response. So we are deferring to questions around the voluntary and involuntary de-escalation room that was asked by Chair, because we're still collecting responses on that data. We have sent the questionnaire out to schools as requested and are still waiting responses from about 70 schools. So we will defer back on that data until then. We completed the onsets reporting questions. There was a question of clarification raised by Barb here around, we had some around students and some around credits. We've updated the information around secondary students who were employed to credits instead of students because we had a number of students that was less than 10, and as shared earlier in the meeting, any students less than 10 is considered confidential. So we have gone into credits, and the credit scores, the number of credits given are there in the chart based on year. Barb here inquired about SEAC members getting access to all family communications. So all family communications are public and posted simultaneously to the board website, which means the links could be shared with SEAC members upon posting. So if SEAC members are interested in seeing at any time all family messages, they can use the website that was shared in the motion action log and get updated information at any time. The checklist shares that all families monthlies update, and then I shared the link for February as well. So SEAC members who are interested in looking at all families messages can do so at any time. We already shared and completed the Neurodiversity Week celebration flyer, and it starts this week, and looking very much forward to the artists and book readings and events that are happening this week. Follow-up question around Barb's here. So Cecil has communicated with principals and has requested them to share their interest in becoming an IPRC chair. That communication is going out. Declarations of interest will then be taken from all interested administrators who are interested in being chairs. And then we will begin to train them to make sure that all principals who are acting as chairs act with best practice and are well trained. Copy of the contained chart was already shared and completed. The C PowerPoint was already shared via email, so marked completed. More information on special education staffing was asked for by Jennifer Knight. While I can share kind of an outline, the full department organization has not been fully approved yet, so I can share a high-level overview of kind of the roles that we'll have in the departments. So we will continue to have 2 coordinating principals for special needs, ASD, DD, medically fragile and special programs, and special programs consultants. We will also have consultants for medically fragile, HOH, and blind low vision. We are going to have 36 special programs resource teachers. We will continue to have occupational therapists that support. We will have 21 HOH blind low vision itinerant teachers, an ABA facilitator, BCBAs, and central EAs that will be housed an ASD resource and transition EAs who will help with special programs and system-wide training. And a transition facilitator and FM technicians and EA facilitators. Through a coordinating principal for GLD gifted, COM, and BOP1, we will have 2 special education program consultants and a K-12 professional learning and program consultant. We will have 19 special education resource teachers, and of course our communication clusters and communication teachers. We will continue to have a department of mental health, working through our mental health strategies and guidelines with integrated services, mental health leads, mental health occupational therapists, a coordinating vice principal for education community partnerships, and a mental health resource team. We will also continue to have the services of our PSSP staff, which includes psychology, speech and language, and social work. And we will continue to have a coordinating principal of social emotional learning and 34 intensive support EAs and senior consultants for the social emotional department. And as shared, I know that's a high level overview, Jennifer, but we will be able to, once fully approved by the director's office, share that structure with everybody.
Thank you very much for that. Jennifer, did you have a question? Your hand is up.
Yeah, I had a couple. First on Barb Sears' request for all family messages. I think, and I might be wrong, but the way I understood this was more the communications that go out that aren't sort of public to everyone. So for instance, when the change to the comm classes went out, and that went out to parents, I think we were looking at, is there a way that the SEAC reps could be copied on those types of communications?
Through you, Chair, I think Barb specifically asked about all family messages. That's what we had documented in the minutes. Sending out specific communications to SEAC around would not be easy to do. So we do communicate most of those things very widely. Our communication department is very dedicated to transparency of messaging. So the best avenue to get kind of board-wide messaging would be through that all families email.
Okay, so it's not possible to get the ones that are more strategic that don't fall under that category.
No, through here, certainly questions can be asked and answered, but yes.
Okay, and then can I go ahead with my second question about the?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So regarding the staffing, when you send that out, because that was a lot, I can't even with that. So I appreciate when you have a chance, you can send that out when you're able to. Could it be set up similar to we have in the past with our reports where it's like last year we had 3 speech paths, this year we have 2, or whatever, that kind of information? Would that be available in addition to the organizational chart?
I would have to do through you, Chair, I would have to make that document that showed the shifts and kind of staffing, but that's something that we could look at. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Oh,
sorry. Yes, through you, Chair, I'll continue. Oh yeah, staff need to be provided. I addressed one question that has already been answered in February, and that can be closed. Jazzy asked questions around the interrogative practices for visional care, and we will be sharing that information with her and with SEAC in May once the jurisdictional review is completed. And I answered Chair's question around the SEG and GSN funding.
And that is the end of our action motion log. Thank you so much, Superintendent Sakado, for that in-depth answering of all those questions. Thank you very much. That's taken off quite a few things off of our log. So we are at number 15. Okay. So that is for adjournment. Can I have someone to move for adjournment of our meeting? All right, I see Jesse Clark.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Jennifer Knight.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
everybody. It was a good one tonight, and I hope it gets a lot out of this.
Good night.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.